Volkswagen's EV sales look to be set to crash, while Ford is likely to reduce its F-150 Lightning line by one entire shift. Meanwhile, we get our first real measurement of the Cybertruck's width, Mercedes crashes two EVs together to show how safe they are, and Sean Fain, the UAW president, who famously wore the Eat the Rich t-shirt, might actually be one of the richest people in Michigan. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First, very quickly, let's take a look at this article that says that Cruise is now offering driverless robotaxi rides in Houston, Texas. As noted here, Cruise is a GM-owned robotaxi service, and it continues to expand its driverless rides through more cities in the United States, announcing a start of services in Houston, its fourth major city. Houston locals can now join the wait list to take a spin in one of Cruise's EVs. So very cool that Cruise has now expanded to 4 cities. It's a very different strategy than what Tesla is doing, obviously. And if you want this, I'm on an Ego Trip t-shirt that is in the merch store if you want to take a look at that. Anyway, I decided I would wear that because it makes sense with Cruise and all of that, but Tesla is going obviously the kind of broad spectrum route. Cruise and Waymo are going a very different direction. They're going city by city and just, expanding it out one city at a time and seeing how it does. It's a very, very slow growth rate. But of course, in those cities, they do offer driverless robotaxi rides. So it is different than what Tesla does now. And then of course, Tesla is basically blanketing the entirety of North America, the United States and Canada, where all the vehicles concurrently are learning how to drive together. Eventually, I expect probably San Francisco first, maybe another city, maybe Austin, in fact. But anyway, Tesla will probably request in one of those cities at some point to have driverless taxi rides where the person doesn't have to pay attention. Maybe they'll do kind of an intermediate thing where the person still has to sit in the driver's seat, but they don't actually have to drive the vehicle. That would be, of course, if you privately owned a vehicle, that would not be the same thing as a robotaxi, but we will have to wait and see how that goes. I feel like eventually Tesla will do that, but right now they're just doing a broad-based thing because what they'd like to be able to do, of course, is turn it on as quickly as possible everywhere. Anyway, really cool stuff. And now turning to Cybertruck width revealed. So I'll, of course, leave the link to all of these articles in the description if you want to check them out, but I'm going to scroll through rather quickly here. But what we have here is clearly somebody who just laid out a measuring tape behind a Cybertruck to get the dimensions. So don't assume this is completely correct, but it does give us a basic idea of how wide the Cybertruck is. And how wide is that? Well, actually, there's 2 different dimensions because, of course, the Cybertruck has a very, very wide sort of top and then it tapers down. But anyway, the person measured 78 inches at the widest part and 72 inches at the bumper. So there's like a 6-inch, decrease in size as you go from the upper part to the bumper part. So, of course, I wouldn't go out buying aftermarket add-ons to the Cybertruck just yet because these are not exact measurements, but 72 inches, I'm 5'10", so I'm 70 inches tall. So it's actually, if I laid down, I wouldn't even be as wide as the bumper. So that's a pretty wide vehicle. I bet you've been staring over my shoulder at this amazing globe behind me the entire video. Well, that, my friends, is a MOVA globe, and it's not only a work of art, but a work of science as well. As you probably know, I'm a huge map and astronomy nerd. So as soon as I saw MOVA globes online, I was hooked, and they're even more amazing in person. Whether you pick a map of the Earth, Jupiter, Mars, which Elon Musk has, or the Earth with Clouds globe that I got, the Earth doesn't just sit there, it actually rotates under ambient light. Isn't that magical? And the science behind it is amazing too. MOVA globes use solar cells, magnets, and the Earth's magnetic field itself to make the globe rotate as you watch it, no batteries or wires needed. Even knowing how it works, it's almost magic watching it slowly rotate around its axis. It's mesmerizing. Be sure to click my link in the description to get 10% off your MOVA globe. And they come in 3 sizes: 4.5 inches, 6 inches like this one, and a whopping 8.5 inches to fit any need. There are over 40 designs to choose from, including space with images from NASA, maps, and even famous artworks. MOVA globes are fantastic gifts, either for a loved one or to give to yourself. Thanks again to MOVA globes for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to click my link in the description to get 10% off your MOVA globe, and join me and Elon in having these amazing movable works of art. And now let's get back to it. And now turning from the good news to the not so good news, Ford's F-150 Lightning Michigan EV plant is losing a shift. Ford's Lightning production woes may have hit another hurdle. The automaker revealed plans Friday to temporarily trim one of 3 shifts at its Rouge EV plant in Michigan, where the F-150 Lightning is built. Ford said the move would occur on Monday, I assume the 16th, affecting around 700 jobs. The American automaker claims the cuts were unrelated to the UAW strike. According to a new report from Reuters, Ford said multiple constraints, including supply chain issues, were behind the cuts. It did not say how long the production cut will last, but noted it will rotate the shift being trimmed. So I assume what that means is that it'll rotate between first, second, and third shifts and everything. So hopefully all of the workers will only lose a third of their employment. That's unfortunate, but that's better than being fired entirely. Ford claimed to be working through processing and delivering vehicles held for quality checks after restarting production in August. The Wall Street Journal, on the other hand, reported earlier on Friday that a UAW official said Ford was considering cutting a shift at its Lightning plant due to lagging demand. The union leader wrote in a memo earlier this week, "It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that our sales for the Lightning have tanked." So here we have a tale of two cities. Ford is saying we've got supply constraints, production issues, things like that are slowing this down, and therefore we're cutting a shift and rotating it around. Whereas the UAW leader and the Wall Street Journal are saying that this is actually from lagging demand for the F-150 Lightning. And of course, the likely truth is that it's related to both of these factors. Usually the truth lies in the middle of the two things that people say. So I'm going to hazard a guess that we're talking about something that lies between those two extremes. But of course, whatever it is, it's not fantastic news for Ford, especially with the Cybertruck release event imminent. I don't know. We're talking about hopefully sometime in the next month or so that the delivery event will happen, and then we will get initial sales in the fourth quarter before the end of 2023, and then really ramping in 2024. So Ford, wants to probably be putting out as many F-150 Lightnings right now as they can prior to the Cybertruck coming out. But of course, if they're not able to manufacture them with the right quality and people aren't purchasing them because who knows why, they're too expensive, I don't know. But anyway, for whatever reason, those combination of things means they can't sell the F-150 Lightning. That means they're leaving a really, really big door open for Tesla to drive that Cybertruck through, which is a good thing for Tesla because, of course, as we just saw, it's a pretty wide truck. And onward to more EV woes. Volkswagen's EV woes continue as new orders miss Q3 target. Europe's largest automaker is struggling to keep up as the industry goes electric. Although Volkswagen's EV sales climbed in September, new orders are failing to keep up, and that's the important point right here. Volkswagen sold 531,500 electric vehicles in the first 9 months of the year, up 45% compared to last year. The automaker's EV share reached 9% in the third quarter, primarily from growth in Europe. Of the over 530,000 EVs sold this year, 341,100, or 64%, were delivered in Europe. The US saw the second highest growth, with 50,300 deliveries, representing 74% growth over last year. VW's momentum in Europe and the US, not China, helped offset sluggish sales in China, its most important market. VW's EV deliveries picked up in China, plus 11% in quarter three after slipping 1.6% through June. The company has delivered 117,100 EVs, or plus 4% year over year, in China through the first 9 months of the year. And here's where we get to the crux of it. VW's new EV orders struggle to gain traction. Despite the success in the third quarter, Volkswagen is still struggling to attract new EV orders. Our order intake is below our ambitious targets due to lower than expected overall market trends. I don't know what overall. Sounds like an excuse to me. Anyway, according to a VW spokesperson, the growth in Q3 was fueled by a higher backlog, which has been waiting to be processed. Supply chain and logistics issues led to extended delivery times, which are now being worked out. And so in brief, while VW is selling more vehicles right now, that is people who ordered the vehicles previously and have been waiting obviously a very long time to get these vehicles. What they're not doing is filling that pipeline in the future with people who want to purchase them in the future. So that means whatever EV sales they're getting right now are going to eventually fall off of a cliff because not enough people are interested in purchasing them in the future. So even though VW's EV sales are up in the quarter, which is great for them, looking forward, they expect demand to really, really crater. And when you combine that with Ford, who's the other legacy automaker who's really pushing hard to manufacture EVs from the United States and Europe, not including the Far East like Hyundai and Kia and all the Chinese brands, of course, but I'm talking about, Europe and the United States. GM is just not even attempting it right now, so we don't really have a good measure for how they're doing. But it seems like these two auto manufacturers who've really put a lot of effort into making electric vehicles are not selling as many as they want to. We're also seeing Tesla drastically reduce the price of their vehicles. Again, they can afford to do this, no problem. I did a video on that recently. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. But what this means is that they're not able to manufacture compelling vehicles at the right price to sell to consumers. They're blaming it on wider market trends, but I don't know that that's true. It just seems like they're manufacturing vehicles that are not interesting to the consumer. And of course, that's a significant problem for these companies because EVs is where the industry is going to. We globally just hit 13%, even in the laggard United States, where it's 7.9% EV sales for new vehicles. And so we're at that tipping point where it's just going to gather its own momentum and keep going. So if these companies can't figure their stuff out really, really soon and create compelling, affordable electric vehicles that people want, they're just going to be left in the dust. So anyway, this is definitely something to keep an eye on. On the good end of things, Mercedes is doing quite well in the EV space, and they just posted this really interesting video. It says, watch Mercedes-Benz crash 2 electric vehicles together to prove their EVs are safe. So if you don't know, a lot of people think that electric vehicles are very, very unsafe vehicles. They think if somebody touches them or something, they'll explode and, catch fire and burn forever and stuff. It is very difficult to put out electric vehicle fires. Battery fires are really tough to put out if they happen, but it is really difficult to create an electric vehicle fire in a well-made vehicle. So skipping down to the interesting part of the article, Mercedes took the crash test to the next level to prove its EVs are safe. The automaker crashed an EQA and an EQS SUV into each other with a 50% overlap. So in other words, 50% of their front ends contacted each other. The electric cars were traveling at speeds of over 34 miles per hour or 56 kilometers per hour and weighed significantly more at roughly 4,400 pounds and 6,000 pounds. And that's compared to the standard Euro NCAP front impact test weight. Although the vehicle damage may seem alarming at first, Mercedes used super slow motion to catch the collision in real time. As you can see, the cabin stayed intact and both doors could still be opened. So there's a lot of stuff that they talk about first, so I'm going to skip to the good stuff, of course, here. So moving on here, and I've got the sound off, and again, if you want to watch this, you can always click the link in the description and see this. But so here comes the test. You can see they're driving towards each other into the light. And then we've got the really, really slow motion version of things. It looks like it's plugged in over there, but I think that's just some sort of a connector for data and stuff. But anyway, you can see the airbags go off. Really nasty collision between the two. This is a pretty brutal type of angle for these two things to collide with each other. But you can see that while the front end of both vehicles is destroyed, number one, nothing caught fire. Number two, the cabins were still good. And number three, you could open the doors afterwards. So things, they crashed into each other at 34 miles an hour. It's going to cause damage. But obviously things went very, very well in terms of the survivability of a crash like that in one of these vehicles. So this is really cool to see. And I actually recommend that Tesla do something like this as well. I know they've got the Cybertruck crash test that they did the April Fool's thing on recently, and hopefully they'll eventually show us that crash test on its own, but it'd be really cool to see a Cybertruck and a Model Y or 2 Model Ys or something like that crash into each other, just for Tesla to demonstrate the same thing as Tesla is doing here, which is that these vehicles are highly safe and that consumers should feel very comfortable driving in them. And again, remember that they're almost impossible to roll because the batteries are in the bottom, which is the heavy part. Even if you flip the car upside down, it basically rolls back over again. So in general, electric vehicles are actually safer to crash in than gas vehicles are. And of course, if you combine us humans with full self-driving, you actually get a situation where hopefully you don't get very many crashes at all. But if you are involved in one, you're going to be safer in that car than you are in almost any other car on the planet. And finally, I want to touch on an article from Fox Business News, and it's been reported in many other places as well. But they have a nice picture of Sean Fain, who is the president of the UAW, wearing an Eat the Rich t-shirt. And that's kind of rich in my mind because, as it turns out, it looks like he makes somewhere around $350,000 a year, which places him somewhere between the top 5% and maybe even the top 1% of earners in the state of Michigan. So I don't know if he's an auto cannibal. Is that what that would be if you ate yourself? But anyway, whatever that is, it really seems tone deaf in retrospect that he wore that shirt, considering how much money he's actually making and the fact that he's doing very, very well. I mean, we're not talking about Mary Barra levels of making money, not millions and millions a year, but $350,000 a year. I wouldn't mind making that much. That would be a very, very comfortable living, right? And I think that most people would probably be more than fine with that amount of money per year. And of course, if you continue reading on here, it says, if Fain's new salary as president matches his predecessor, former UAW President Ray Curry, his union income increased to $267,000 and change, and his overall salary, including what he earns from the nonprofit UAW Chrysler Skill Development and Training Program, increased to $454,385, a salary that would make him a top 1% earner. So I don't know what your feelings are, but my feelings are if you earn in the top 1% of salaries in a state, you are rich. So anyway, this is one of those interesting situations where you've got someone who's purporting to be very much middle class. And I don't deny that he comes from middle class background, right? He doesn't come from a wealthy, privileged background, but it's kind of, the pot calling the kettle black at this point when he's like, oh, you people are rich and you make too much money. And it's like, well, arguably, maybe you do too. Who knows? So again, in retrospect, him wearing the Eat the Rich t-shirt is pretty tone deaf deaf on his part. He should definitely never have done that. Even before I knew what he made, I was like, that is a really, really tone deaf thing to wear that shirt in public, especially in this sort of role and especially under these circumstances. But even more so now, he really should have avoided wearing that shirt at all costs. All right, with that to wrap things up, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new car, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.